So we've talked a bit about how the Chinese Communist Party is using political warfare to make the 2040 scenario you described happen. So what can Japan and the U.S. or other allies do to prevent the 2040 scenario from occurring?
I always come back to education. The book, Political Warfare, has been very well received in Washington and Congress. Members of Congress, their staffs have contacted me about it because they hadn't seen how political warfare was described, put all together in one book. This describe how it's conducted, all of the ways and means that are used. Or normally in the American government, we tend to stovepipe aspects of it. The State Department will stovepipe public diplomacy, for example, public affairs, but they won't necessarily get involved in strategic psychological operations. They don't. The military is the same way. They'll stovepipe certain aspects of it. Few people have been looking at it holistically, the way that we need to look at it, so we can fight it effectively. A policymaker, an elected official, if you don't know what the threat is, if you don't know how they're attacking us, it's impossible to come up with suitable means to counter it. The education is the first step. So in terms of education, what Japan can do with the United States is, and unilaterally, and I stress unilaterally for a reason, is start building education courses for their elected officials, for the members of the Diet, for those who are in the Prime Minister's office. What is political warfare? How is it being waged against us? There is no formal instruction in Japan on that. I'm part of a think tank that deals with Japan, the U.S., and Taiwan, and it's always an uphill battle from the Japanese perspective for them to even get time with the Prime Minister's office to talk about these issues. They're always way too busy with everyday activities. Members of the Diet don't have staffs like American members of Congress. They don't have the people to do the research for the Diet members. So it's hard to get their time and get their attention. Well, Japan has to start doing that, or you can't get the proper legislation. Part of how the U.S. can help is to assist with those education efforts, either through a regional center that Japan could host, or through better ways of educating across the board in civil society in Japan, and across their government, to include the self-defense forces. The other ways that Japan can help itself is study some of our laws, like the Foreign Agents Registration Act, some of the steps that, say, Secretary of State Pompeo took regarding reciprocity in hosting Chinese news media, for example. Steps taken to control the Confucius Institutes. There's 15 Confucius Institutes in Japan, 8 Confucius classrooms. That's a lot by other standards in Asia. Even though Japan has woken up to the insidious nature of the Confucius Institutes, as well as some of the United Front Work Department friendship organizations, and that they're still effective over there. They still play a role in Japan. Japan can crack down even more on them. So they can take some lessons from the U.S. on counter-espionage laws, counter-subversion laws. Doesn't mean America's the model. Recently, inexplicably, our government chose not to prosecute 5 Chinese spies that lied when they came to the United States to do research, but they were PLA officers, and for political reasons, my guess is to get the meeting that they wanted in China recently, the U.S. dropped charges against these 5. So having good laws on the books doesn't help you if you don't have the political will to use those laws. But nonetheless, Japan needs to take some lessons from what we've been able to do in terms of passing laws that can help to constrain PRC political warfare in Japan.
And the Quad obviously is a big factor in attempting to restrain the Chinese Communist Party. How do you think that is developing?
Well, if we're seeing some high-level meetings now between India, Australia, Japan, and the U.S. that are encouraging. So we can't expect a NATO-type alliance. We can't expect to go back historically to a Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, SEATO-type alliance. What we can expect is working a lot more effectively between the Indians, who fully understand the venal nature of the beast that they have neighboring them. They've lost a lot of troops to PLA attacks, and they understand that they're facing an existential threat, and they're engaged in kinetic combat, which right now the U.S., Japan, and Australia is not. They're engaged in kinetic combat and face-to-face confrontations between the Indian Army and the PLA on several border points right now, contentious confrontations that aren't necessarily resulting in bullets flying and knives being run through people's throats. That has happened not too long ago, but it could happen again very quickly. India knows the score. I've been working with the Chennai Center for Chinese Studies in India, and there's some very, very good people there who can help Japan in better understanding the nature of the threat that they've been up against for so long and how they're dealing with it. Australia has shown remarkable backbone, remarkable resilience under blistering PRC propaganda and economic warfare attacks against it. Australia can provide moral support and provide mentoring, if you would like, to Japan in exchange of expertise on how to expose the political warfare. Exposing it's critically important, Chris. So let me digress on that part. Report after report says that Japan's media, even though it's a supposedly free media, the reality is they have a very cozy relationship with the elites over there. They won't expose the honey traps that they know about, the ones that the Chinese, the Diet members who are been entrapped, blackmailed by Chinese agents, female agents, and sexual enticement. They won't expose a lot of what's been going on with the bribery, coercion, if they know about it to begin with. And again, it's a cozy relationship because they're part of the elites over there. They won't put that in writing. So it's hard to find open source material, people who are dedicated and brave enough, because it takes physical courage, not just moral courage. It takes literally physical courage because there's physical threats and physical damage that has been inflicted upon people who have taken on this challenge. You've got to find people in Japan who are willing to do that. In Australia, and in Anne-Marie Brady's case in New Zealand, you have gutsy people, smart, gutsy people who have gone out and found this information and exposed it. And that's created a sea change, at least in Australia. New Zealand's still a toss-up. But so Australia, as part of the Quad, can work with Japan on this. And the United States, of course, has a lot of capabilities that can be brought to bear if, again, we have the will in State Department and the intelligence and wisdom in the Global Engagement Center and in our Department of Defense. We can do a lot working together.
So I guess to wrap up, you presented a very bleak image of the future for 2040. Do you consider yourself to be optimistic that can be avoided?
Of course, I wouldn't be here. Wouldn't be here talking with you and Shelley and Matt and discussing the problems so we can better detect, deter, counter, and defeat the PRC. If I didn't think there was a great chance for us being victorious, if I thought we were going to lose, Chris, if I thought we were all doomed, this would really be cheap gin, and it's not. I'm not depressed. I'm optimistic because I see, again, great feedback. It wasn't just Congress, it was DOD and others that have come back and said we needed a book like Political Warfare that helped us to better visualize and understand the threat that we face. And so, again, I see a turning point being reached. Again, the Japanese people understand there's something seriously wrong with their totalitarian, brutally repressive neighbor. They may not understand how they're being attacked and how effectively they can be subverted, even though they don't necessarily like or trust the Chinese. They can still be defeated by political warfare. The Chinese can still win, but there's a lot of indicators that people are willing now, much more receptive to learn, especially in this COVID era, where it's quite clear what happened and how the PRC lied, covered up, still making a massive propaganda effort to confuse and distort the history of what is this COVID Wuhan virus that has killed 4 million plus worldwide. And then watching what happened in Hong Kong, where China lied again, and now has destroyed what democratic freedoms that the Hong Kong people have, and then their increasingly aggressive threats and then their murderous intent, frankly, about what they want to do with Taiwan. I think there's an awakening now. People are receptive, where they may not have been this receptive to learn maybe even 5 years ago. So I'm optimistic, Chris. Yeah, but we need to start working pretty damn hard and pretty darn quickly.